All right. Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about pursuing a life of peace instead of chasing happiness. And this is actually something I heard Kane Kerner talk about many, many months ago in one of his little reels that he does. And I thought the idea was just such a good idea, a good jumping off point. So I wanted to kind of take his thoughts and expand on them in my own way. So if you want to check him out, I'll tag him in the descriptions of all of these things. But yes, so this video is going to be talking about living a life of pursuing peace instead of pursuing happiness, because I feel like when we shift our focus from trying to make ourselves happy to considering what's going to give us the most amount of peace and satisfaction long term, this will oftentimes bring us so much clarity when we're feeling stuck in our lives, when we don't know what the right answer is, when we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, when we're in pain and we don't know how to get out of that pain, and when we're considering if we want to engage in something or if we want to just be a part of something right now that might make us feel good, but isn't going to serve us long term. And again, this is not necessarily like an easy mindset to live from. And there are definitely, for all of us, going to be times and places where we pursue happiness or we pursue just what's going to make us feel best in this moment. And that is not always a bad thing. That is not always a wrong thing. It's just that we kind of, if we can shift ourselves to be sort of overarchingly looking for peace and building a life of peace versus happiness, generally speaking, we're going to be a lot happier in the end, okay? And now before I get into all of that, again, I just want to let you all know that my mystery school is fully open and fully ready for you. If you really resonate with this material and you love the idea of learning tools and gaining resources and tools to understand your own emotions, to understand your body a little bit better, to be able to work through your history so that you can sort of understand how you got to where you are right now and why you do the things that you do and how the things that you're doing right now all have a positive impact. And if you want to learn the step-by-step process for getting on your own side and being someone who can emotionally regulate yourself and have compassion for yourself and understand yourself so that you can be a better problem solver in your life, that is what the mystery school is for. It is about giving you the step-by-step process for developing this sense of unconditional love within yourself, which completely transforms the way that your nervous system is going to function, the way that your mind is going to function, so that you can, like I say, find better solutions for the things that's going on in your life so that you can understand yourself on a much deeper level and then learn to build a life that works for you rather than continually trying to fix yourself or change yourself to fit into a mold that's never going to work. So that's what the school is for. You can find links to it no matter where you're watching this in my Instagram bio. You can find it in if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find it in the box down below. And again, with the school, you get 4 courses. 3 of them are 1-year programs each, so that's like 3 years worth of material, video and written work. And you get access to the private Facebook group community where you can interact with everyone else who's going through the course. You can talk to me on a daily basis, and we have private meetings every month. So if you are looking for some community and some support in doing this work, because I know that this self-love work can be very lonely and isolating and not a lot of people are doing it. So if you're looking for that kind of support, that's also part of the school. Okay, so that's that. And it also really helps me if this material resonates with you, if you find this helpful, if you interact with the post, if you like it, you share it, you subscribe, you comment. That stuff all really helps with the algorithm to get this message out there, because yeah, I am trying not to pay corporations to help me do that. So I would rather this be grassroots, and I'd rather it just be people who are finding this beneficial sharing it. So that's my little spiel before we get going. Okay, so thank you for listening. And now we will get to today's material. So again, we live in a world where we are kind of raised to seek immediate pleasure. And we are raised to live these lives where so much of what we focus on a day-to-day basis is about trying to make ourselves feel good right now. And again, I don't think that that's a bad thing. And I do believe that that's like completely makes evolutionary sense, that of course, why would we not want to feel good as much as we can, as quickly as we can? And again, I've talked about this in a lot of different videos, which is the idea that in real reality, how our biology works and how our neurochemistry works and just the way that we seem to have evolved or were created or whatever it is that you believe of how we got here, is that these pleasure mechanisms, the biochemical concoction that happens when we say that we feel good, right? Like the release of dopamine, the release of oxytocin, the suppression of our cortisol, the raising of our sex hormones, all of these biochemical processes that go on in our bodies when we feel good, generally speaking, should, when we are connected to, if we were to have like a direct one-to-one connection with absolute reality and there was no interruption and anything in between that, the things that we do that support our survival, that support our growth, that support our connection with one another, which is part of supporting our survival, the things that we do that are good for us. And when I say good, I mean literally like they support our lives in some way. They make us more expanded, they make us more surviving, they make us whatever it is, release these hormones, right? When there is a direct one-to-one connection, that when we do things that are life supportive, it's supposed to feel good. And that's part of how our system is wired to encourage us to continue to pursue these things that are supportive for our lives, because we are a biological species that's one main goal, is the same main goal of every other living thing, which is to keep surviving, to keep being alive. So we as self-aware people, as self-aware beings, can feel when we are doing something that is supportive of our survival, that is supportive of our growth, that is supportive of our expansion. And again, right, like not just our survival because like base needs, but also the fact that we are complex human beings with emotions and thoughts, and we can create art and all of these things. Like we're not just doing things to survive and that's the only thing. We also love to express ourselves. We love to connect. We love to do things that are even more than just keeping ourselves alive. And again, all of these things are going to have a positive feedback loop inside of ourselves when we have just like that direct, clean, one-to-one relationship with nature, because these things support the ultimate goal of life, which is to keep being alive, to keep expressing, to keep growing. So the idea that we pursue pleasure, the idea that we want to feel good all the time, is completely founded in reality. It's founded in our experience of having hormones and all of these things that we have that are meant to keep us alive, that are a part of our keeping ourselves alive, that are part of us growing and changing and evolving and expanding and all the magical things that you want to think about the human life as being, as well as just the most base keeping ourselves alive. The pursuit of pleasure is natural, it's normal, it makes perfect sense, and we don't want to not pursue pleasure, right? So I want to make that very clear from the very, very beginning of this talk. This is not a talk about how we should be just like living lives of quiet desperation because that's ultimately what's better for us. There's so much nuance and complexity here that we want to understand when we are considering what pleasures to pursue, what pleasures are actually helpful for us, and in understanding the things that may feel pleasurable now, that may feel pleasurable in this moment, that may give us relief in this moment, and really understanding again, if those things are truly the best we can do right now, and it's not even about trying to get rid of all of our temporary pleasures that maybe aren't the most awesome for us long term, but that there are some times and spaces where foregoing what's going to feel just the most relieving or the most nice right now is going to set us up for having a better chance at long-term happiness. Okay? And that's why we're going to talk about this shift of pursuing happiness to pursuing peace. Because again, pretty much all self-help, spirituality, personal growth people are going to talk about this concept of future pacing, right? We're going to talk about this concept of, if you actually want a satisfying life, if you want a life that's going to feel good long term, we do sometimes have to sacrifice our temporary pleasure, our temporary feeling good, our temporary happiness in order to create something better for the future. But where I feel like this can so easily go off the rails, and so often does go off the rails, is when we take this concept way too far in the other direction, and we start to live for like doing the hardest things possible and never letting ourselves have temporary pleasure, and really looking at any of our like coping mechanisms or the ways that we self-soothe or the things that we do in the moment that maybe are kind of not long-term happiness builders, but we need them right here, right now. We can start to look at those things as just bad and wrong and a waste of time and things that we have to get rid of right now. And we can kind of get too far into this territory of thinking everything is for the future and everything that we do now has to be hard and has to be the worst thing ever and has to be discipline. Otherwise, we're not living a good life. And we can, like I say, get too far into the everything needs to be discipline and everything needs to be hard, and we need to be pursuing like the highest, most spiritual, most expressed, most pinnacle thing at all times in order to be living a good life. And that's just as equally unfulfilling and unsatisfying as constantly living for just immediate pleasure. We want to start to pursue peace, which is far more of a middle path than either of these two extremes. Okay, so like I said, if we've been in the spirituality and the self-help and the personal growth world for a while, most of us are pretty familiar with the understanding that a lot of what people do on a day-to-day basis to make themselves feel good long-term causes harm, right? It doesn't actually make us happy. It doesn't actually make us fulfilled. It doesn't actually give us the results in life that we want, that make us feel good overall. Rather, a lot of us are living in ways where, again, we always have to look at systems, right? We always have to look at the bigger picture and why we're doing what we're doing and why we're pursuing what we're pursuing, putting ourselves in context so that we're not just saying like, why am I doing all these immediate temporary pleasure things and not pursuing what would be good for me long term? There must be something wrong with me, or I'm weak, or I'm shameful, or I'm undisciplined, or whatever it is. No, right? We live in a world where so much of what is considered normal, so much of what is considered just, this is what you have to do and this is what you have to be in order to make money, in order to have food, in order to have a home, in order to be even relatively safe. So many of those things cost us our humanity. So many of those things do not feel good for us to do. So many of the ways that we live in this life cause us a lot of pain and stress and anxiety and lead us to burnout and all of these very real, uncomfortable, negative side effects in order to have a kind of like normal life or to even be fighting for a normal life. Okay? And then on top of that, the things that we're socialized that we have to do to fit in, to have friends, to have people look at you and not think that you're just a total freak that they don't want to have anything to do with. Because again, right, we are very social beings. And from the very beginning of our lives, when we were in that temporary reality where everything that we wanted and everything that we needed and all the protection we needed and all the provision we needed and all of the pain we were ever in and all that stuff had to be provided by our caregivers. We did not understand ourselves. We did not understand reality. We learned that we were dependent on being loved and being approved of by the people around us in order to have pleasure, in order to be safe, in order for our needs to get met, and in order for any pain that we may have been experiencing to be alleviated. We grew up in a world where we're constantly bombarded with this fear that we're going to be rejected, that we're going to be outcasted, that we're not going to be understood, we're not going to be loved, we're not going to be approved of, and therefore we're not going to be okay. We're not going to be able to survive, we're not going to be able to be happy, we're not going to be able to have the connection we want, we're not going to be able to express the way we want to express. This is all so deeply tied together. Our sense of feeling like we're going to be okay and our sense of feeling like we're going to have our needs met is deeply tied to how much we feel like we're going to fit in. And that is part of how culture continues to get us all to participate in systems and ways of being that don't feel good to us, that are not humane, that are not the best thing for most people, but are the best thing for the owners of the means of production, the people who run corporations, the people who are profiting off of the ways that our society works. We are constantly fed this fear that if you don't keep up and if you don't do what everyone else is doing and if you are weird or different or whatever, you're going to be outcasted, and that automatically triggers us into a state of feeling like we're going to die, whether we're aware of it or not. And so we will continue to do whatever we need to do to fit into our conditioning, to fit into our cultures, to fit into our social groups, to fit into the work culture, to try to be things that we just simply aren't. And again, right, to live these lives where we're perpetually feeling shitty, where what we have to do on a day-to-day basis just makes us feel like shit. And we then turn that in and perceive that to be because we suck and we're failing and we're not measuring up and we're not fitting in. And then the self-help world and the spirituality world comes in and is like, yes, that's right. That's why you're in pain, because you're not fitting in. You're not doing the right thing. You just need to fix yourself. You need to up level. You need to get rid of your negative beliefs. You need to change and whatever, all with the intention of getting you to align with normal, right? Like that's still pretty much the ultimate goal of most spirituality, self-help, personal growth, is to make it so that you no longer have these negative emotions, you no longer have pain in your body, you no longer have existential fear or dread, you know what your purpose is in the terms of what you're supposed to produce, so that you can go and produce that, and you can produce it without getting burnt out, and you can produce it without getting tired, and you can produce and produce and produce, and then when you're not producing, you can consume. You can consume the right things, right? You can consume the Louis Vuitton bag so that you fit in with popular culture, or you consume the organic hemp smoothie so that you fit in with the hippies. Whatever it is, you find your social group so that you're producing the right things and you're consuming the right things. And then we live these lives where we constantly feel unsatisfied, where we're chasing temporary pleasure, we're chasing temporary relief from the pain of living in a society that is not designed to support the human being. That is why most of us feel the way that we feel. Because we're so afraid of not fitting in. that we live by conditioning. Yes? Okay, I got a comment here. Yes, so many times I have been told I need to conform to my assigned gender, be more spiritual. And again, right, like this, just so much of this, you have to be this way in order for society to approve of you, to understand you, and therefore for you to be safe, right? Like, it's just this loop over and over and over again. Because for a lot of us, we are going to come to this self-love path. We're going to come to this awakening path. We're going to come to our spiritual path. And when we're really getting on our own sides, when we're really practicing compassion for ourselves, when we're really actually showing up, as in, I'm going to sit here and learn about who I actually am, instead of continually assuming I know who I'm supposed to be, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and if I just was those things and was doing those things, I would be happy. And the reason I'm not happy is because I am not that thing and because I'm not doing that thing. We open up past that and we look to discover who we actually are. We're going to discover, I don't fit in. I don't align with the things I've been told I'm supposed to do. It would not matter how much I forced myself to be good at whatever I'm supposed to be good at, to be producing what I'm supposed to be producing, to be expressing how I'm supposed to be expressing. That is never going to make me feel good because it's not who I am. It doesn't align with my humanity. So now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now I'm stuck between a nervous system that is 100% convinced that if I don't fit in and I don't do what everyone else says I'm supposed to be doing, and if I rebel from culture in any way, I'm going to die. Right? We have that nervous system program, all of us. And culture is constantly baiting it so that we're constantly in that state of fear and then turning it in on ourselves. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. The reason I feel shitty, the reason I feel scared, the reason I don't know what my purpose is, the reason I can't produce and consume at the rates that I'm supposed to be producing and consuming is because I'm failing. So then I'm going to spend even more money and even more time on self-help and self-improvement programs to try to get myself to just no longer have my negative emotions and no longer have the things that I have so that I can fit in. Or, right? Or I'm going to acknowledge who I actually am. I'm going to acknowledge my actual humanity. I'm going to see how it doesn't fit into culture. And I'm going to have to figure out my own way of doing things. I'm going to have to learn to be okay with people not agreeing with me and not understanding me and antagonizing me. I'm going to have to learn to figure out what are the things in culture I can do, what are the things that are helpful, what are the things that are good, and how can I integrate and keep those things without sacrificing all the rest of myself. Okay? And that is deep work. That is, like I said, the rock and the hard place. Realizing that you are who you are and you are never going to be what everyone wants you to be, to whatever degree that is true for you. Realizing that your negative feelings that you experience at work, that you experience in your relationships, that you experience in your production and in your consumption are not coming because you suck. You're not feeling anxious and stressed out and tired and overwhelmed and negative and all of these things because you're failing to live up to expectation or because there's something wrong with you. You're feeling those things because that's your body and your emotions, just like what we were talking about at the very beginning of this call. That's the feedback loop of the stress and anxiety that comes up when we're doing something that goes against our survival. When we're doing something that goes against what's actually truly good for us. It's the opposite of that pleasure response that we get when we're doing something that's truly beneficial for us. The opposite side of that is the negative response we get, the pain we feel when we are going against what is good for us. Now, where there's nuance here is, again, we live in a world where we can do a whole bunch of things that release those feel-good hormones and chemicals right now, right? With super high sugar, high fat, high salt foods. that we know that hijacks the brain to a degree. I'm not saying it's like as addictive as cocaine. It's just we know that that gives us that release of that feel-good hormones that doesn't necessarily align with those foods being like the most supportive for our health long term. Not to say that those foods are bad, not to say you should never eat those foods. It's just to say we know that it's causing a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction is not because we're being physically nourished with a bunch of nutrition, right? Which is kind of the point of food. We know that we can watch a really stimulating movie and it can like excite our brains so much and make us feel high and adrenaline and all these things. And that wasn't necessarily something that's like supportive of our expression. You see what I mean? We live in a world of a lot of we've learned how to kind of hack our biology and give ourselves these temporary highs that mimic what nature does when we do something that is truly good for us. And this brings some confusion to this whole, what should I be pursuing? What actually feels good long term? What feels good just short term? Because again, we live in a world where so many of our short term pleasures feel really good in the moment. And they are distracting us, and they are giving us relief from the overarching ways that we're living that don't feel good. And then in order to find the things that are actually going to feel truly life supportive, so we find these things to find these pleasures that are the actual pleasure in real reality, where you release those feel-good hormones because you are actually doing something that is supportive of your life. In order to find those things, in order to figure out what those things are, in order to be able to actually experience those things, we have to separate ourselves from culture enough to figure out what those things are. And then not only that, we have to work through the very real negative feeling cascade that's going to happen when we do something that's different from what we were trained to do. Okay, so the degree to which what is actually supportive of our life and our growth is different from what we were trained we had to do and we had to be to fit in and therefore be safe, is the degree to which our nervous systems are not going to feel good right away doing something that's actually life generating for us. Does that make sense? The degree to which our body perceives doing this thing gets me rejected and therefore it's dangerous and not good for me is the degree to which you're going to have a stress response to something that might be genuinely good for you. So a lot of us live our lives never actually tasting real, true pleasure. The pleasure of something that is truly life-sustaining and generating for us. Because a lot of the things that are truly life-sustaining and generating for us go against culture and what we were trained and indoctrinated we had to do and be in order to fit in. And our bodies still believe that the best thing for our survival, this is why this happens, the best thing for our survival, the best thing for our long-term expression, the best thing for us to stay here and stay alive is to fit in, right? Because again, remember, in the temporary codependent reality of our childhoods, that was absolutely true. When our bodies were learning how life worked from 0 to 7 and past that for a lot of us, before we had cognitive awareness, before we had the capacity to understand what we wanted or what we needed or how life worked or how we could get our own needs met, the first program we got programmed into our bodies was caregivers are God. They have access to everything. They are the arbiters of our reality. And the only thing that seems to be what changes them providing for me, giving me what I want, giving me what I need, taking my pain away, and not doing that, is how much they are loving me, how much they are approving of me, how much they are empathing and considering me. So we learned that the way to get what we want, the way to be safe, the way to survive, is to figure out what the authority figures in our reality want from us, so that we can live up to that, so that they will figure out what our needs are, they will figure out how to get them met for us, they will figure out how to take away our pain, because we are pleasing them. So our bodies learned that the best way to survive is to figure out what the social rules are and to follow them, because then those who are in authority over us will meet our needs, will take our pain away, will give us space to grow and express and learn and do all these things. Yes? So then when we become adults and we start to figure out, I can't keep doing what everyone expects me to do. Living up to expectation doesn't actually make me happy. It doesn't get my needs met. It doesn't help me understand why I have pain, what's actually missing, what I need to do to feel better. Fitting in isn't the answer to that. Fitting in is no longer the middleman between me having what I want and me feeling shitty. I now have to figure out what my feelings mean. I have to figure out what my body sensations mean. I have to figure out what my emotions mean. I have to figure out what ways of being and what ways of living, in terms of my working, in terms of relationships, in terms of how I eat, in terms of where I live, in terms of all of these things, actually feel good to me. Get my actual needs met, right? It's a whole different paradigm from what do I have to do and what do I have to be so that I'm approved of, so that other people will understand me and other people will meet my needs. Shifting from that to I need to learn to understand myself. I need to learn to understand how reality works so that I can understand what my needs are, I can understand what does and doesn't work for me. And then I can figure out how to interact with real reality to get those needs met and to get away from the things that don't feel good for me. That's a whole different paradigm, right? That's the self-love path. That is the path of the mystery school. That is what we learn. That is what I teach, is how do you shift from this life where we are fully trained that what we have to do and be in order to be safe and be happy is fit in, and to constantly be trying to fix ourselves and police ourselves and monitor ourselves and look for what's wrong with us that we can't fit in or that we don't feel good, to saying, no, I have a basic nature. I have a way that I am. There are certain things in culture that just do not work for me, that are never going to work for me, that maybe don't work for anyone. And that is why I am in pain. It's not because I'm failing. It's not because I suck. I'm in pain because something's not working. I'm in pain because I have a need that's not being expressed. All of the things that we talk about in the school, all the things we talk about on these videos, right? And understanding that finding that way of life that feels good, that's going to feel good to us overall, requires that we go through a phase where we have to retrain our nervous systems. We have to show our nervous systems that being who we really are and pursuing what actually works for us, so leaving the corporate job or leaving the relationship or expressing ourselves in a different way or whatever it is that we need to do to start to figure out what actually supports our truth so that we can get our actual needs met, is going to require going through that phase where it feels like we're going to die when we do that, because our bodies are so convinced that going outside and getting rejected and people not understanding us and people telling us that we're wrong and we're bad means we're not going to be okay. So then most of us just get caught in these lives where we pursue temporary pleasure, where we pursue what just feels good in this moment. Because of course, to do anything else feels like death, feels completely overwhelming. And a lot of the time, right? We're just not even clear. We don't know what we want. We don't know what we need. We don't know why what we're doing hurts. We don't understand that because, again, it's the water we're swimming in, right? We have to understand that the cultures we were raised in, the religions we were raised in, the how we're supposed to be in our relationships, so what kind of work we're supposed to be doing, how much money we're supposed to have, what we're supposed to look like, all that stuff, that was sold to us as the only way, as the right way. We also have to understand this, right? Whatever culture, religion, way of being you were raised in, you weren't only being given this is what you have to do and have to be in order to be good. You were also being fed the idea that to do anything different was worse, was bad, made you sinful, made you wrong. Look at those terrible people doing that, expressing that way, having that religion. And look at all the terrible results they're getting in their life because of that. Right? There was so much fear given to us that a lot of us don't even realize that the thing we were raised in as the right way is the very thing that is hurting us. And we don't realize that there are other options and other ways of doing things that might work and feel better eventually. Once our nervous systems can adjust and see that it's okay, that even though we left our conditioning and we got rejected and people don't understand us, we're still okay, are even available, right? Like we don't even see, we don't even perceive that there are other options because we've been trained and our perception has been filtered for our whole lives. This is how you have to do it. This is the only way to be. And if you can't do this, this is the way to happiness. This is the answer, right? Over and over again. If you follow this religion well enough, it will make you happy one day. If you pursue the career enough, one day it's going to pay off. No matter how painful it might be for you right now, no matter how horrible it is, no matter how much you have to fight, no matter how terrible you feel while you pursue it. That's just your weakness. That's your laziness. If you keep going, one day it's going to work out. No matter how miserable you are in your relationships, it doesn't matter. This is how relationships are supposed to look. This is what a good relationship is. This is what a good wife is supposed to be. This is what a good husband is supposed to be. This is whatever. And you need to fix yourself in whatever way you need to fix yourself to align with that because it will make you happy, right? Like that's the promise. If you just align enough, one day it will make you happy. So when we start to question that, we lose the promise that if we just fight hard enough and try to keep fixing ourselves, we will be happy one day. And we exchange that for now, I don't know what the alternative is. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And is there even a guarantee that anything different is going to be better? And then all the conditioning that tells us that no, anything different is just going to be worse. And then our programming that tells us if you do something different, you're going to die. Right? So is it any wonder that we are so susceptible to living lives of temporary pleasure, where we just pursue what feels the best in the moment, where we pursue what's going to get us approval in the moment, where we pursue what's going to give us a break from the overstimulation in the moment, right? Because of course, this other path of figuring out what's actually going to bring us peace and what's actually going to make us happy long term is hard. It's really challenging. And not just intellectually, not just figuring it out hard, but it's hard physically. It's hard nervous system. It's hard emotions. It's so much conditioning coming up to tell us, no, if you do something different, you're going to die. Everything's going to be worse. You can't figure it out. And even if you did, you're wrong. You're bad. You're failing. You see? So this is why I think like all these talks about you need to pursue long-term happiness and you need to stop thinking about all the things that make you feel pleasure right now and you need to just become disciplined and all that stuff. Okay, But how is that actually helping long term us figure out what's actually going to make us feel good? Right? So this is where the shift from pursuing a life of happiness to pursuing a life of peace comes in. Is when we can start to slowly work ourselves with our compassion and curiosity tools first, right? This is why this is the foundation of this self-love work, is working on becoming our own safe place. Working on continually learning to show up for who and what we are right here, right now, in our pain, in our struggle, in our confusion, in our not knowing what we're supposed to be doing, in our seeing who we really are and being really afraid of that and all of that. And just starting with finding all those places, right? We want to jump into self-help. We want to fix ourselves. We want to blame ourselves. We want to abandon ourselves. And just having compassion. This is not my fault. I am not the one causing my pain. I am not failing. I am not bad. I am not wrong. I live in a very complex world. I was taught a lot of things that probably aren't correct. My nervous system is wired for fitting in, and fitting in is not necessarily the actual best thing for me. And that is not my fault. Because this is the one biological hack that I think actually is a real true hack. Because remember, our nervous systems are programmed and they're wired that when we feel love and acceptance, we feel like we're going to be safe. No matter how out of alignment that is with real reality, it doesn't matter. The very first program we got is, when I am being loved, I am going to be okay. So the more we can access that feeling of love, that feeling of being approved of, that feeling of being empathed by ourselves, the more we're going to shift our nervous systems from a state of fight or flight into a state of rest and digest. And this is what opens our perception. This is what opens our capacity to the next phase, which is curiosity. This is how we start to break through our conditioning and our programming and our perception of this is what life is. This is why you're in pain, because you suck. And here are the reasons why you suck. And here's what you need to fix about yourself. Right? That's the loop almost all of us are in all the time. Every time we feel like we're being rejected, every time we feel like we're in pain, we automatically, our nervous systems get triggered. It's because I'm being rejected. Right? Because now that relationship, it goes both ways. We feel rejected, it makes us feel unsafe. And we feel like the only way to become safe again is to figure out why we got rejected, to fit in again, and then hopefully that's going to meet our needs. When that's usually not the case as an adult, but okay. But it works the other way around too. When we are in pain, like for instance, say we went to work and the job that we do does not align with who we are. It feels bad to go to that job. We go to work, we feel pain. We're automatically triggered into a state of thinking, what did I do wrong? Where did I not fit in? Who did I disappoint? Because our brains and our bodies believe that pain comes from being misunderstood. Pain comes from being rejected. Because that's what we believed and that's what we saw as children. So we are in pain and we automatically go into trying to fix ourselves. We automatically go into what's wrong with me instead of looking for, why am I in pain? And for some of us, instead of even being able to recognize, I am in pain, that is what I'm actually feeling. I'm not feeling rejected. I'm not feeling not good enough. I'm feeling pain. I'm feeling like I hate my job. I'm feeling like I hate my boss. We don't even get that far because we just start to feel negative emotion and we automatically get triggered into fixing ourselves. So when we can bring in this, okay, I'm feeling that spiral of trying to fix myself. I'm feeling that spiral of just looking for the temporary pleasure to make the pain go away. What do I need to do to fit in? What do I need to do to numb myself, to stimulate myself so that this pain will go away? we have compassion. We start to practice being our own safe place. I am on my own side no matter what. I am not failing. I am not shitty. That's not why I feel pain. That is going to, like I said, shift our nervous systems from that fight or flight state that we're in when we're trying to fix ourselves. Right? Because again, remember how our evolutionary biology works. When we feel that sense of pain, we automatically going into fixing ourselves, and then we're going to go into that thing we always try to fix about ourselves. Right? We all have that thing. It's my body. It's my friendships. It's how I am in social situations. I'm not producing enough. I'm not consuming enough. We have that tripwire. Oh, I'm going to go in and improve that one thing that I always think is the reason for everything. Because our brains and our bodies are wired that whatever saved us the first time from what we thought was the threat of death is the thing we're always going to do from now on. So whatever we saw in our childhoods as being the reason why we were being rejected and what we thought we needed to do to fit ourselves back in, whether or not that had anything to do with real reality. If we saw we were being rejected, we changed something about our behavior, we tried to fix something about ourselves, and then we didn't die, our needs continued to get met, our brains and our bodies thought that thing that I did to fix myself was the thing that kept me alive. So now every time I feel pain, I'm perceiving that it's because I'm being rejected. I'm going to try to fix that thing about myself to try to make myself feel like I'm going to be alive. I'm going to be okay. So having that compassion is the first step. And then we start to get curious about what we're actually feeling. What if it's not that I'm shitty? What if all these stories of what I have to fix about myself and the reason I'm in pain is because I suck aren't true? Yes? How do I start to look for what I'm actually feeling? How can I just get into my body and rather than thinking about all the stories, what do I actually feel and where do I feel it? What does it feel like? Maybe this does not mean, right, the shittier the feeling is in my body, the more true my thoughts are. What if the shittier the feeling is in my body, the less true my thoughts are? That's not how this works. If something is really true, even if it's painful, it might not feel amazing to see the truth sometimes, but there's always going to be a bit of empowerment in it. So when we're just like, I'm just shitty and I feel shitty and the reason I feel shitty is because I suck, I guarantee you no one out there feels like, yeah, that's super empowering and that feels true in the sense that the true feeling sets us free. It'll mobilize us to go fix ourselves. But if we look at our pattern, we're going to say, I've been trying to fix this thing about myself for years. And it's not making me happier. It's not solving my problem. So we can start to see where the fixing ourselves is the ultimate living for happiness and not for peace. We just keep trying to fix ourselves. We keep trying to improve ourselves. We keep trying to make ourselves different because we think that's going to make us happy, but it never brings us peace. Right? It's just as stimulating junk food. Junk in the sense that it's not a lot of nutrition. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat junk food. I'm not judging junk food. We're just saying, right? We know what it does to our brains. Self-improvement is the exact same thing. It makes us feel like this hit of I'm going to fix myself, and then I'm going to fit in, and then I'm going to be okay. And we do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and it never brings us peace. Because like I said, the path of actual peace is this whole other path of realizing where we were programmed, where we were conditioned, what is and isn't in alignment with real reality, and how we're going to have to not align with society and what society tells us. And go through the emotional process of learning to hold ourselves through all that fear so that we can get to the other side where we can actually start to see what is truly actually good for us long term. and to be able to do it even in the face of people not understanding and loving us. So I have a question. Do you have any insights on challenging some of those particularly stuck negative beliefs, the ones that keep coming up that feel so self-punishing? Yes. Again, right? Like, I know you've been in the mystery school, and this is part of that work. That it sounds so simple and it seems like it can't work, but it really is something we have to practice every single day. So we have to be committed to the understanding. Like, we have to be committed to the understanding that we are not broken and we are not shameful. And that whenever we're going into those self-punishing thoughts, that is not reality. Like, we have to be committed to that as we get started. Because there's always going to be a reason that society is going to have for us, or that our minds are going to come up with, that no, I do need to punish myself. It really is because I'm shitty. Here's all the things that other people have said to me. Here's all the evidence I have that I am shitty. Right? That is always going to be there. We have to have the fortification inside of ourselves that we are committed to doing this work, even as the world tells us not to do it. Even as we have all these examples that prove that we are shitty and horrible. That's the first step. That's why I think this path just isn't for everybody. Because it requires a discipline from the very beginning to commit to saying, I may not know why this shitty, painful thought is wrong. I may not know how it is that I'm actually good or innocent. I may not be able to understand what I could do or what I should be doing instead. I don't have those answers yet. But I have to lead with the belief that these thoughts aren't true. Before I have the total understanding of why they're not true and what I should do instead. That's why this is so hard. We have to commit to the idea that these punishing, painful, horrible thoughts are not reality. Before we're going to have the understanding of what we need to do instead and what we actually are and how we are good. We have to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. That's why in the school, right, I teach almost like a faith in oneself. It's one's own goodness. That's exactly it. You have to train yourself to see your goodness because you have been trained not to see it. Like, we have to understand that. We have been trained to see ourselves as broken. We have been trained to see ourselves as not good enough. We have been trained to continually work to fix and change and improve ourselves. That is the training we got. And if that training is not giving us the results we want in life, peace, the ability to do what we need to do and feel good in our life, we have to understand we were given faulty training, which means we have to retrain something different. And retraining something different is gonna feel weird. It's not gonna feel true. It's not gonna feel real at the beginning because we have all of this evidence to support the training we got. That's how our perception works. Your perception has been filtering out anything that didn't align with your training to make your training make sense so that you have a foundation to work from for your life. So now you're questioning those foundations, right? To actually say, no, I'm going to believe that I'm good. And I'm going to start to look for the evidence for how I'm good. I'm going to start to look for the evidence of how that old way doesn't work, isn't true. I'm going to look for the evidence of how I am good. I'm going to look for the evidence of how I just have needs that I need to get met. I'm going to look for the evidence of how getting my needs met is going to make me different and weird and that I can be okay. And that's going to be hard at first. That evidence is not going to be automatic. It's not going to be obvious because our perception has been working to not see it this whole time because it contradicts what we currently believe. That's how our perception works. We have to have faith. That's why we show up with compassion and curiosity as our base foundational practices every single day. And why I say practice. This is what choosing a life of peace actually means. It's not about just trying to discipline yourself to do the hardest thing you can do in the day and like eat healthy and never watch TV again and only read books and blah. That's just swinging to the other way of putting yourself in a different box. When we really pursue a life of peace, we're starting from pursuing a life where we can finally see ourselves as fundamentally good, just needing understanding and support. And where we can see ourselves as people who can problem solve, who can figure out what we need and what we want, and we can do that even when society doesn't understand and when we have to do it on our own. That's what pursuing a life of peace actually means. Where our conditioning is constantly telling us that we suck and we need to fix ourselves. We need to look and say, is that bringing me peace? Or is that temporary moment of feeling like we're going to fix ourselves? That temporary happiness that leads to the constant pain because it's not addressing the issue. You are not in pain in your life and seeking temporary pleasure in all sorts of different ways that maybe aren't good for your health or your long-term goals because you suck. You're not doing that for that reason. You're doing it because you were trained that the way you have to do and the way you have to be goes against what actually makes you happy. And you were trained that to do what would actually make you happy or even to figure out what would actually make you happy is going to make you fundamentally unsafe. It's hard. It's hard to pursue a life of peace. A life of peace sometimes requires that we numb out and we scapegoat and we do whatever we need to do to turn the pain off sometimes. Because again, this world is complex. Figuring out what we want and what we need is not always possible. Actually getting what we want and what we need, not always possible. Sometimes we need to cope. That doesn't mean we're not pursuing a life of peace. Pursuing a life of peace long term is about learning to get on our own side. So no matter what, we are not in a state of shaming and blaming ourselves for shit that isn't our fault. And when we're the most empowered to support ourselves in what we need and what we want in whatever way that is possible from wherever we are. Because again, it's not always perfectly possible. We can't always give ourselves exactly what we want and exactly what we need. But we can be a nice place for ourselves. We can be nice to ourselves. We can show up for ourselves in a new way and at least support our nervous systems instead of just being in a constant state of self-rejection. We can stop pursuing the temporary happiness of when I fix myself, I will be good enough and then people will love me and then thinking that's going to meet all of our needs. That's pursuing a life of happiness. It's no, I need to understand what my actual needs are and how to get those met in real reality. I'm not a child anymore. My pain is not because I don't fit in. There's something much deeper there. So yes, we have to commit to seeing our own innocence before we even see it. We have to do it over and over and over and over and over again until we start to see it. Until it starts to make sense. Because it will. But you got to commit to it first. So that's what pursuing a life of peace is actually about. It's no longer being your own worst enemy. It's no longer going for the temporary stimulation of I'm going to fix myself and then that's going to fix my whole life. It's what do I actually want and what do I actually need and how do I actually feel and why do I feel that way if it's not because I suck. Right? When you take that away from yourself, when you make a bright line, my pain is not because I suck. That's when you're going to start to see what is actually going on. But so long as you're allowing yourself to say, no, my pain is because I suck, that's all you're ever going to see. Does that make sense? Your perception is already tuned. that your pain is because of your fault, because you are failing. So if you never challenge that, if you keep allowing yourself to go to that, that is all you're ever going to see. If you want to see something else, you have to take that scapegoat away from yourself. It is not because I suck. So what is it actually? And then you have to be okay with, I don't know sometimes. Right? Okay, well, if it's not because I suck, I don't know what it is. Stay open. Stay curious. Keep looking. Give yourself an opportunity to see something different. Don't just keep going back to the same old, it's because I suck. Because if that were true, you would have fixed yourself by now, and you would feel good. Yes, exactly. It's the childlike view. It was the only way to cope as a child. That's exactly it. But you're not a child now. Right? So the new adult perspective is, if I am in pain, there is something to that pain, and I need to look for what it actually is, and it's not because I suck. And it's when we make that hard line for ourselves that we might actually be able to see it. Like I said, we have to challenge our assumptions. If we just keep going back to, it's because I suck, we will never see the real reason. We have to challenge it even before we know what the alternative answer is. Okay? So you got to be committed. That's what this life is. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. Hope that was clarifying. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you when I see you. I would love to see you in the mystery school, because this is basically what we're doing in the school. It's this step by step by step by step by step by step by step. 3 years. Lots of support. Okay? So that's what the school is. All right. It's a boundary with oneself. Exactly. This is healthy boundary setting. I am no longer going to go to that place. Or, we're going to go there. We all go there sometimes. We catch ourselves when we're in that, trying to fix ourselves and trying to change ourselves. We have compassion for that. We understand, right? I'm doing that because I'm trying to save my own life. Now, I need to say, but that's not it. If that were it, I would be fixed by now. So what is it really? Right? We don't get mad at the part of ourselves that wants to blame ourselves and go into self-fixing. We have compassion for that, and then we expand beyond it. Okay? So there's no bad part. That part that wants to shame and blame you is a good part. It's just trying to keep you alive. The only way that child self knows how to keep you alive. We just have to show it something different. Okay? Okay. Thank you. I love you. Have a good week, day, whatever. And I'll see you when I see you. Mwah.